I am sharing my screen and I can't see anyone right now. But greetings in the name of the Lord Jesus. Thank you, Reverend Jamie Haddock, and greetings also to Bishop Valerie Melvin. I appreciate them in this region for allowing me the opportunity to share with you, but also not just the opportunity to share, but seeing the need, seeing the importance of church security and safety within our congregations. And to add it as one of the series for Mindful Mondays, because when I think about Mindful Mondays, it's important how we can be more mindful, proactive, how we can prepare ourselves as we protect our congregation, being mindful on Sunday morning worship. And so during this time tonight, I will just be sharing with you some steps about how we can be proactive. And throughout the presentation, just do some broad strokes, if you will. We won't do a whole lot of deep diving into these areas because of the time we have together tonight. We have about 50 minutes, if you will, in conversation. I do want to allow some times for questions at the end. But one of the things I want to do, and I know because of one of the things that has been really on our radar, is the active shootings that has happened across this nation. We've had 39 in this year, 39 active mass shootings in the United States. But to start this conversation off tonight, what I'd like to do is to use the chat. The chat, we don't have a poll, but I want you to use the chat and I want you to answer these questions. One question. First, let me say, I got to back up and give a shout out to St. James Christian Church, Disciples of Christ, which is, I will say, the best congregation in Eastern North Carolina. So let me say that. And thank you all for being with us on tonight. So before we start, I want you to answer these questions in the chat. I want you to rate. This first question is a rating. So tell me, how safe do you feel during worship? How safe do you feel? From a scale to 1 to 5, and 5 being the highest, how safe do you feel doing your worship? 1 to 5. And the second question I want you to answer is, do you have a security plan in place in your congregation? Do you have a safety security plan? And then third, do you have a security staff? Do you have a security staff? And if not, then who do you expect to ensure your safety? Who is it that you look to? Is it your pastor? Is it the usher? Who do you look to provide those safety for you? And hopefully you put some, I see there are 23 answers in the chat. Thank you for responding. Some folks says, yes, it's the ushers. Some folks says they're about 4, 3, 2. But a lot of what I'm saying is no, there's no safety security place. And there are some who says, yes, it's a 5. And they look to their pastor for making sure they're safe. And part of that is absolutely correct. It is the responsibility of our pastors to ensure that you're safe. So you're in the right place. Welcome to Church Safety and Security seminar tonight. So let me start by saying this. I don't think it's shifting. Go to the next slide. Give me a second. I think I'm gonna have to stop sharing for a minute because I think it's frozen since I had it up as people were coming in. That's great. Now I can see faces though. This is good. I can see lovely faces. So I'm going to start this again. I think it froze on me. Get to see some of my folks there. From the beginning. So, yeah, it froze on me. So like the rest of society, what is happening in this world, and we've seen it, that churches also around this world need to ensure that safety and security of their facility, the building itself, the staff itself, and even the worshipers who come in the sanctuary, who come just to hear God's word. But sadly, what we find ourselves in today is that this issue of safety within the church itself has become relevant to us because we've learned that even within the churches, it appears sometimes not to be safe. So tonight's goal is that we want to make sure and know that we must be proactive about how we prepare, how do we protect those that God has entrusted us to care for, and not only just spiritually. As one of you who responded in the chat, that it is the pastor's responsibility, not their job, but it is the pastor's responsibility to make sure that there is a safety and security plan in place for his parishioners, to all those who come into God's house. So we want to make sure that we are providing and being proactive in doing so, because that is the key to all of this. We don't want to be reactive, but proactive in making sure that our churches are safe. So the goal of this presentation tonight is, one, to offer some information, to give us some understanding, and then to discover some ways in doing this. And so we want to offer suggestion. That is my hope tonight. I can't, require, but these are just some suggestions that I want to offer based on my experience as a former police officer and now serving as a National Director of Safety and Security. But how is it that we can protect the flock, protect the people from unexpected violence? Because again, we're coming into God's house just to worship, just to praise God. But I want to offer some suggestions of ways we can do that, the things that we are not expecting. And then, how is it? And to understand just some of the common challenges. Oh my goodness. I'm going to blame it on Sister Greta. I was admitting her in and hit the wrong button. Sister Greta, that was your fault. So understanding some of the common challenges that most places of worship encounter with safety and security. What are the things that we are facing? And hopefully some of these you can get some answers to the things that you are facing, some of the challenges that you are dealing with, even in your worship places today. And then the final goal is just to discover how you, whether you're a pastor or a member of a church, how you, particularly in your fellow worshipers, can develop a safety and security plan and an emergency operation plan, because that's the key to it all, is about being proactive and addressing those challenges that you may have, but have a plan in place. How do we do that? So that's what we want to try to do tonight in our time together, is just offer some suggestions, understanding what some of those common challenges are, and then develop a plan of action. Looking at the text of the Bible, and where we always ground ourselves, and as my congregation knows, I always say, make sure we ground ourselves in the Word of God. And we recently have gone through the study of Proverbs, and Proverbs 22:3 tells us that the prudent sees danger and it takes refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty. So what the Proverbs is giving us some wise counsel here, that we must look and see beyond and make a plan, if you will. But if we avoid that, then there will be some penalties in place, because we haven't planned, we have not been proactive in preparing safety and security plan. And even when Jesus was with his disciples in Matthew chapter 10, verse 16, Jesus tells his disciples that he's sending us out as sheep in the midst of wolves. So therefore, it's important for us to be wise as a serpent and harmless as a dove. So we have to be wise. We have to be proactive in planning for our churches a very security plan that will make sure that every person that comes in at least feels safe, and putting those those things that we need to do in place. So keep those texts in mind, and let us do those. As the text says, that we have to be prudent to see the danger, because we have been seeing danger within our media that shows us, and I'm going to show a video. Hopefully, we should have time, but I had a video I want to share with you tonight about when we are proactive, what is it that we can do in taking the refuge that we want. Because we come into, there's a psalm that says that God's house is a place of refuge, and we want to make sure that we keep it as such, a safe place that all can come. But we also must be very, very wise. Very wise. Not that we're trying to cause harm to anyone who comes into our church, but we want to make sure we are protecting those who are in the sanctuary. So what are some of the common challenges? Again, these are just the list of some, maybe not all. But again, one of the things that I've come across in churches is that there is a lack of professional security team that may cause churches where we have to rely on our volunteers in most cases. We don't have a law enforcement team, and that's in the church. At best, we can, of course, contract, but this is one of the challenges that we have: the lack of a professional security team. Training worshipers to recognize unusual activities or persons. That produces a challenge, because for the person who, again, is coming to just worship and to praise God, the challenge is, how do we even train them to recognize unusual activity? What is unusual? What is strange? What are they doing? What are they wearing? Is it a person that frequently comes into God's house? Do they have a backpack? What are their clothing? Something bulging out? Is those things, but training worshipers to do this. And that will require some time. In the police department, there's time to do that. There's training that takes place to do that. But when you are relying on your everyday worshipers who are not looking for those kind of things, that can produce some of the common challenges that churches have when it comes to safety and security. Now, this next bullet can be a positive or a negative, that there's limited access to the building. By having only one door or a few doors as possible when visitors are entering the church. And sometimes that's good, because if it's only one way in, that can produce a challenge. But also, when you are want to make sure that there's no rear doors that are open, that someone can easily come into your sanctuary without coming through the front, where the usher or your security team is not seeing them. And so that can produce a challenge for our congregations. And then utilizing, if you will, surveillance cameras, these centric televisions, surveillance cameras, because it can be financially costly, and it can be a burden to some congregations who cannot actually afford the equipment necessary to make sure they can watch all the perimeters around the building while you are in worship. And then at the same time, who's monitoring those cameras? Who's watching it while we are praising God and giving glory to Him? Who's watching us? So these are some of the common challenges that face churches when we're talking about safety and security if you do not have these things in place. So what do we do? What do we do when we have to address threats of violence that may happen? I would offer and say that we have to establish security protocols and procedures with staff and members. That is important, that this is done jointly together, that these policies and procedures are developed. That is one of the first steps when we're talking about being proactive, what is your church policies about these issues? And that is why it's important that the pastor, that staff, whether you have a higher staff, whether it's the members of the congregation, they need to establish first the policies and what are the procedures, who's going to call 911 and so forth and so on. Those policies must be in place. And once you get those policies and procedures, it's important that you educate the church on those security plans, that they know what to do, and identifying specific roles and duties. If you have a security staff, whether it's the ushers, whether it's the greeters, whether it's your trustees, whoever it is, but you need to identify roles, duties, and responsibilities in that plan, in your procedures, like who will call and contact the police department if there was an intruder, if there was something happening of a person who looked suspicious, if you will, and had brought in a suspicious package. That is outlined in your plan, a part of what your policies and procedures would include. One thing I would like to say here, that if you did have an intruder that came in who was armed, it's best to obey their demands and instruction. That kind of information is laid out and written out clearly within your policies and procedures, and a part of the security plan of what to do and how do you handle a person that is an intruder that actually came in armed to your sanctuary. One of the things that we said earlier about the common challenges is in making sure that your worshipers knew how to identify a person who looks suspicious or suspicious activity. It is the screening procedure, screening our visitors and persons who may even come in to deliver. If you are a church that has office hours or church hours outside of Sunday, whether it's during the week, what is that procedure and how should it be implemented during those business hours of the church? All of this is important as a part of your plan and knowing what is the procedures there. So again, your security policies and procedures also outline the processes that should be taking place for your visitors or anyone that you're not familiar with, in particular, even the persons who are delivering things to your church. Is there a log? Is there a place that they buzz in or get signed in? But that is, again, should be established early on in your policies. Also think about this, that when we're addressing these threats, we have to do our part to make sure that certain aspects of the church facilities itself, such as lighting in your parking lot, whether they are, make sure that they are inspected regularly so that they're operable. Because if they're dark outside, if people are leaving the church, if they're late night services or dinners or practices at church, we want to make sure that those lights and everything is operating within your church. Your alarm system, your fire, smoke detectors and fire alarm, all those things, we have to make sure that they're operable. So there should be some inspection periodically done in your church. And that information, again, I want to keep saying this, should be in your policies, should be in your procedure. And who will be the person responsible for making sure that is happening? We don't want to assume that it was sister or brother so-and-so who did it, but who is the responsible person? And then how is that notated? How is that documented that it was checked on this date, if there's some kind of log? But that is a way to make sure that if you put this detail, I mean, you have to be as detailed as possible in your policies and procedures. That will help you moving forward. It's kind of thinking way beyond, if this person doesn't happen, then what, then what, then what? All the steps, all the thinking through should be followed through in your plan, okay? Establishing a safety and security program. Now, this is kind of similar as a security plan, but it really gets, you want to get the assistance. As I said earlier, some of the challenges that we may have within congregations that you don't have a professional team. So what do we do in this case? In establishing a safety and security program, we must identify and get the assistance of experienced members. You may have folks who have worked as police officers or worked as some kind of safety officer at a hospital or loss prevention, even at like a TJ Maxx or retail store. But you want to get as many experienced members as possible who do have some kind of security techniques for law enforcement to lead in this process. Get those persons on board, get that team together to start developing the program and the plan for your church. So because the direction and the coordination of your program should rest on a person that's staffed, if you don't have a staff person that's full-time or part-time, but also it could be just a security committee. And that security committee can be comprised of people, again, that you pull together to pull together this security plan. So they pull together different members who have some experience or maybe not have experience, but you want to have them a part of your security committee in developing your safety and security program and plans, okay? The formation of your church, safety and security programs should also be actually after they're formally prepared and you establish it, clearly written out policies, procedures, that plan then and program should be approved, if you will, by the congregation. Because again, we want to educate the congregation about the plan, but we also want to get the buy-in and the understanding and the support and approval by the congregation. So once the plan and the program has been established, you want to get the approval of the congregation. The operation of your security team. I put here, it should consist of two parts. It should be an interrelated strategy. And that information, again, will be outlined in your program, your safety and security program, because you want to have visible, which is overt and overt presence, and also the invisible, the covert of presence, if you will. One of the things that I do and have done is that, whether it's an event, but in the church, you want to make sure, for example, if you decide as a congregation, you want to hire and contract local police departments to provide security for you during worship, which is a great idea. And I highly recommend that if you can afford it. Most law enforcement agencies in this area will charge about, $30 to $35 an hour to provide a service, sometime at a minimal number of hours of 4 hours at a time. That's wonderful and great. They will be the visible, the overt presence that you need. But sometimes it's also good, depending on what's happening in your church, whether it's some kind of special event, that you have the invisible, meaning that there's somebody that's undercover, if you will, that will just blend in with the congregation. And it depends on what you're doing, really, whether that is really, really a need. But it's still good to have someone who is a part of your security team that is really sitting within the congregation. They're just worshiping, may not be on detail, but they're there in worship. They're the person that's invisible, but yet visible. They're invisible to the person who may come to try to do harm, but at the same time, they are invisible presence. And so that is also good. So I always suggest that there is this two interrelated strategies that you are including in your safety and security program that is not just a uniform, a police officer or uniform security persons that's in your church, but you also have a person that is undercover, if you will, the invisible, that is sitting there, that is blending in with all the members of the congregation, but no one really knows that they are actually working as a part of that security team. So establishing a safety and security program will benefit you, and that is the way of being proactive to make sure as much as possible to keep our congregations and members safe. So who is the security staff? Identifying that security staff is really important. The question I asked about earlier, do you have a security staff? And if you didn't, who would ensure that you're safe? Who you're looking to? But if we are planning, if we are being proactive as we are tonight, which is great, I thank you so much for being here, because it shows me that you are very concerned also about the safety and security of your congregation. So identify your security staff. It may not be a professional team, but you can identify a team and a staff that will do that. And you can get clothing. That is also important. As I said, in this interrelated strategy, it doesn't have to be a uniformed police officer, but it can be persons that are part of your security team that could have shirts or polos that will say security. That's very clear. So they will be, of course, your visible security team. So identify who is and who will be your security staff. Some of the responsibilities, I like to go over those of your security staff. What are their responsibilities? Once you identify those persons, they want to know, what am I going to be doing? What's my task? What is my role? What is my assignment? Visual monitoring of areas. If you have a nursery, if you have a daycare, a small room, Sunday school rooms, a worship service, whatever those areas are, your security staff, that is one of their primary responsibility, is monitoring and watching, just walking through, checking those areas, checking those doors, making sure that everyone is feeling safe. I think for people who are in those areas, whether it's in the worship or it's in the classroom, even seeing your presence as you're walking by those doors will make them feel even safer. That is one of the questions I poll, like, how safe do you feel? When you feel and know that there's a sense of presence, of security that's in uniform, that's their job, that's their responsibility, is to make sure that you are safe during your time of worship, whether you are in small group rooms or Sunday school rooms, but to monitor those areas. Also, not just the classrooms and the sanctuary, but it's also making sure you're keeping eye on the parking lot, walking those parking lots once in a while, making sure cars are safe, particularly if there's night services and worship services that are happening outside, but not only just during nighttime, but during morning. Make sure you're surveillancing, taking a walk through parking lots. I want to say to members, you may feel like, well, I'm at the church and I don't have to worry about locking my doors. Please lock your doors. Please lock your doors. That was one of the things that I often got when I worked as a police officer. And folks will leave their doors unlocked. Says, oh, I was just going to run in and grab this or do this in the grocery store. And when you run in the grocery store, you think you're going in for a couple of items. I know I have, and then you end up with a basket full of stuff. But lock those doors. Also, being present while offering is counted. That's good to have that presence, to let the treasurer know and the trustees know that, wow, they're watching, because it's, you can't count and watch at the same time, but to have the presence of a security standing by that door, outside that door, making sure no one goes in and that they are safe. So they're having that present, just being present while the offering is being counted is another responsibility of your security staff. And dealing with emergency situations, whether it is someone getting sick or and calling 911, or whether if there's a daycare and there's a need and an emergency with a child in the nursery, they will help deal with those emergency situations. And of course, there'll be more training that is needed based on what the emergency will be. That training, of course, will be provided at a later date for those persons responsible to do that. But the main point is that as a staff person that's a part of your security, a part of that security team, your responsibility is to deal with emergency situation and platforms for security. What kind of platforms are needed? That should be a part of what that security staff will be dealing with, whether it is cameras, whether it is other monitors, but also making sure that they are watching those cameras and so forth is a responsibility of that security staff. They're dispensers, persons, because whether you're usher who's there, they are a dispenser of information such as location of a classroom, location of where they should go in certain places of the sanctuary, just as your ushers, just as your greeters, there too, because they're in that shirt. Folks will come up to you and ask questions of what to do, where they should go, where's the pastor study and so forth. So that they can also be dispenser of information and be well-versed in the evacuation and safety procedures. That is probably, again, one of the key things, because your role, if there wasn't an evacuation, that folks had to move quickly out of the building, that safety team and security staff will be the people that will need to know which doors to use, where's the safe place to move even when you leave out of the sanctuary. Where do we get people to a safe zone is what we call it, a safe zone. So being very well versed in the church's evacuation and their safety procedures. So these are the responsibilities of your persons that you will identify to be a part of your safety and security staff. These are their tasks. This is what they will be responsible for doing. Now, I'd like to talk some about, there's a little difference between security plan, security and safety plan. I want to talk a little bit here about developing an emergency operation plan. This emergency operation plan is part of, particularly when we deal with threats within a church or an event. There are three things. You have to plan, you have to practice, and prevent. Plan, practice, and prevent. All this will bring about being proactive. Being proactive, you have to plan. One of the things when you're developing your emergency operation plan is that you should meet with your first responders. As a church, it's important to meet with them. It's important that they learn how they should respond to a shooting that's in your building. How do they respond? Making sure that they understand how to get in, make it easy for first responders to assist you, and provide them with some blueprints of your building. Of again, that's part of what that evacuation plan will be, even for your for your safety and security team. But for our emergency operation plan, your police departments, that's where you build those relationships with your police department. I tell folks, Establish that early on to build relationships with your local police department. Foster those relationships that they know who you are. They know your building. They know some layout of your building to make it safe, so that they have emergency contact information of the pastor and any other persons that is a part of your emergency response team or your security team and safety team. They should have that contact information, but it comes with building that relationship and reporting any threats. If there's some kind of threats, that is the part of the plan. Reporting those threats to your safety and security team of the church, including if there's some kind of restraining orders. We don't think about that a lot, but if there's a restraining order, make sure that your safety and security team know that. Sadly, it's important also, I want to put this here, that if you are going through a difficult divorce or something within your church, or going through domestic violence within your church, sadly, it's sad to talk about, but we need to know that your safety and security team, not the whole but church, but it's important to say, hey, I don't want this person, you know, around me. There's a restraining order for them to be around me, but bring that to the attention of your safety and security team, and make sure that there is an active shooting emergency part of that action plan as well. So planning number one, that's how we be proactive and making sure we have this plan together. That's emergency operation plan is what I'm talking about. And you have to practice. There's mock training. You have to practice that you have a crisis response plan. What do you do? And so this is the time that you practice. You don't wait. This is a part of being proactive, that you rehearse. There's a rehearsal, if you will, with what that emergency response team would do and how it would work and how it would function. Have these drills. Remember how we did fire drills in school? This is the time to do those drills and to train your entire congregation. So outside of educating them, it's good to walk through your safety and security plans that they will approve, but it's also important that the congregation also participate through drills in your emergency plans. That if in the event, and we don't want that, but they've drilled, they've thought about what doors, where would I conceal and hide myself, and so forth. But you have to have the drills, and your local police departments can assist you in doing that. And prevent, again, create a plan, and practicing safety drills with your congregation are fundamental steps that you can do to protect members if there was an active shooter. So those are the things we want to do. Those are the things we want to do. And however, there are some things that we can do to prevent any incident from happening altogether. But the best thing to do in being proactive is have in place an emergency operation plan. Being proactive to plan, to practice, and the best way, how can we prevent it, if possible, from happening? Having your plan is important in this whole process. As I suggested earlier about these cameras, and sometimes it can produce a burden because of the financial cost, but there are some, you have to do your homework and research and find out what you can afford, but think about utilizing surveillance and security cameras throughout your congregation. So this can enhance your church safety and security. If you use if you use surveillance equipment and cameras, it can actually enhance the work of your security team, that there can be some person that can monitor and see those. Again, it's important to be well versed in the laws here in North Carolina, but there is the Fourth Amendment that tells us that in the Constitution that states that we have the right as a person to uh, to be secure in our person, our house, our papers, and so forth and so on. But being reverse that, but we can use these cameras. We use them in our homes, right? Doorbells, uh, alarm system has cameras. So it's important to use those same kind of cameras in our churches. So the use of surveillance cameras can play a vital role in providing the peace of mind that we want for our members to have, our visitors to have, who enter into a place of worship. We want to have that peace of mind. They can be a vital role because you can actually see what's happening. And those cameras should be located in perimeters on the church property that can capture anyone coming into your building, whether it's a window or a door, you can watch from the cameras. And there are certain places that we should make sure that we are placing those cameras on our church property, and we can think about that. We need to make sure that the location of the cameras are positioned in a way, particularly in blind spots that you can't see. But you want to put those cameras in hallways. You want to put them at the entrance of the building, the rear of the building, any doors. You want to make sure that you have cameras there. And again, if you have nurseries, a nursery or a preschool, daycare, you want to put them in those areas as well. Your church offices, administrative office, put cameras there. Your parking lots, there's places you can mount those on certain poles within the parking lot itself. Again, the perimeter of the building, you want to make sure those cameras are there. And if you have a place where your treasurer and your finance team is counting monies, you can also make sure that a camera is placed where a safe or a lock box is put where money is stored on the plate at the church. So those are locations of where we can place these surveillance cameras in our sanctuary. There's an area that I want to talk about a little bit, and then I want to show you a couple of videos. Hopefully we have some time to do that, at least one video. I was going to do it in between this piece about the emergency operating plan, but I'll go back to it and show you that video. But this is a piece that we don't often talk about, is a medical emergency plan as well. I think it's important as the church to make sure we include a medical emergency plan. Based on the American Heart Association, they talk about these 4 points as the chain of survival to get the best and quick medical attention that you need to save, to help someone who is in a medical crisis. And so one of the things that they said in this chain of survival is EMS, that you have early access to EMS, the emergency medical services, that someone must call immediately 911. And I don't know if anyone has gone through first aid training, but that's one of the first things they tell you to do is call 911, and then you start CPR very, very early. Very, very early. You want to start administering CPR. Again, a part of your emergency plan should include and make sure that people and persons who is a part of this, whether you have nurses in your congregation, they will be a great place to have folks a part of this team, doctors, but anyone working in a medical facility could be great to be a part of this team, because they need to be certified. They need to make sure they can administer CPR and clearing the airway and so forth and so on. But administering CPR, and make sure you early defibrillation. If there is you don't have one, it may be something that the church should consider and do. It should be a part of your emergency plan, is actually have a defibrillator on site, as well as a first aid kit. We easily can get first aid kits, but we don't think about getting a defibrillator, but that is something. But early defibrillation can help save a person, particularly who was in cardiac arrest. So early advanced cardiovascular care is the key things that they said. These are the 4 this chain of survival to get the medical attention that we need quickly for someone that's maybe having a crisis right in our congregation as we are singing a hymn or whatever it may be, that we need to make sure as a church that we also have an emergency, a medical emergency plan in place, and who is on that team, who can be a part of that work and writing out the plan as needed. I want to show quickly a video. I think I'm going to stop sharing for a minute and pull up this video. And hopefully I still have it saved down here somewhere. I will be sharing also with you another document I did called a it's safety and security ministry, because we, again, let me get to the video I want to show. Give me a second, please. And hopefully this has been helpful to you.
Or 2 decades. It's so effective, it was recently featured by multiple news outlets including NBC, Fox News, and ABC. And now, you can use the blue button below to discover. Of
course, the security alerts we've been talking about bring to mind that deadly shooting last June inside an historic Black.
I guess you can hear it, but you can't see it. Hold on one second. And if you have questions while I'm pulling this up, because I do want you to see it, please put them in the chat.
We could see, as well as hear,
Oh, you could. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we can see it right now, Reverend Dr. Della.
Oh, why is this is not the one then? Oh,
Thank you.
okay. That's not the one. I am having some problems pulling up the video I want for you. And I have 7 minutes, but I am determined. Everybody good? Everybody good? Okay. Give me one more. I want you to see this video, and I don't know why it started and then it went to something else. Well, okay.
Life is like that.
And I have both, I'm seeing both of them. I bookmarked them. I'm going to just minimize I'm wondering,
I wonder if you could send the links to everyone. We can make sure you have all of the list of people who registered and you could send them later. Would that be helpful?
that would be helpful, I suppose, but not helpful to my presentation.
She wants us to see them in the here and now.
Yes, to make it relevant, but I will,
It'd be
I
good
will-
if you could send copy of your slides to everybody.
stop here. Let me, just go back to my, presentation and see if, there are any questions, for me. I think we've gone through everything. Are there any question? That was the end. I thought it was the end. Any questions?
I don't have a question, Dr. Owens, but it's been a lot of good information, and it's given us an awful lot to think about. You mentioned so many things that I had never considered, and I consider myself a person that really sit and watch what's going on in the church. But there's a lot that I had not ever thought about. So you've given us a lot to really consider. Thank you. We appreciate it. It's been well worth the time.
Wonderful. And I was sending, it's just the video. It started with a part of the shooting from the church in Charleston, South Carolina. And it showed where a church itself actually went through the training with the police department to better prepare themselves. And I wanted you to see some of the exercises that they were doing. And I think it would have helped us, is why I wanted to share it in the moment. Because I do understand as teacher that there is this connection of information when you get it fresh, and then seeing it itself of a video will resonate more of what we're saying about the importance of having these plans in place and being proactive, is why I wanted to share. But that's the video. I'll try to drop it in the chat. There's also a book I would like to recommend. It's called Church Safety and Security. It's just a practical guide, and I can put that information in the chat as well as we start to close out. And I'm also willing to share, as I said, I did a security training, I would say manual, if you will, on safety and security ministry, because I think that's, but it has in it part of some of the content I've shared tonight. But one of the other pieces that is important, if you don't also have this system, it comes from the Homeland Security actually created a active shooter handbook guidelines that you can also just pull that up on the website. But it was in this, I think I have it, a hyperlink within the document that you can click on, and it will take you actually to that document. But thank you so much to the region and to all those who came and to share with us on tonight. And I pray it was also helpful for you, that you will begin to think about those questions that I asked you early on, and then to begin to respond to say, if you said, no, we don't have this in place, then this is something that we should begin to think about, and to make sure that we have a safety and security team, a safety and security plan, a safety and security program, as well as an emergency operating plan, and a medical emergency plan, because God has entrusted us to make sure that the members and visitors and all those who come are safe. He's entrusted them to us for spiritual care, but not only that, in the time that we are in, unfortunately, we got to make sure that everyone who comes, because we are such a welcoming people, because we embrace that Great Commission. But as people come, everybody unfortunately does not have the same goal in mind to come and worship with us, but yet want to come harm us. So let's be proactive and put those plans into place. Greetings, thank you all, and have a wonderful night. And that will end my presentation, and I will send any information to Reverend Jamie, and she can share that out to those who register for this workshop.
Reverend Dr. Della, thank you so much again on behalf of the Regional Church in North Carolina, and thank you all for tuning into this session. We hope that it has been helpful. I believe that it has, and thank you for addressing all of those things. We will get out links to all of you who have registered or are here with us, as well as hopefully sending something out through the region a little later on for those who request it. So thanks again for everyone who joined us this evening, and pray that you all will be blessed for the rest of your weeks and have a wonderful week.
Okay.